Turnstiles in Canada? Is that what they are? Gates for dogs? The entire studio froze at these harsh words. Several commentators could not hold back their chuckles, and then loud laughter erupted from the audience as well. On the screen appeared footage of Union Station in Toronto in the early morning, where a stream of people moved with astonishing order. The fragile glass paddles of the Presto gates opened and closed silently and continuously. "Are you joking? Is this the standard for a modern railway system?" uttered Natasha Volkov, an engineer for Russian Railways, RZD, shrugging her shoulders slightly. She crossed her arms over her chest with pride, a challenging smile playing on her face. "Our high-speed Sapson trains use turnstiles with facial recognition and thick steel barriers. Even a child could jump over this." The host of the program chimed in. "Indeed, the gate at my apartment complex is probably more secure than that." The audience burst into laughter again, too. "No sense of security at all. Or do Canadians trust each other too much?" In an atmosphere filled with mockery and sarcasm, Natasha nodded with satisfaction. For her, a turnstile was a symbol of technological power: thick steel, high-resolution surveillance cameras, complex data analysis systems. It is something that must be protected by absolute vigilance and control, not by trust. Therefore, she could not believe the simplicity of the turnstiles in Canada. "Is this even allowed? Anyone can walk through for free." Hearing her words, one of the male commentators interjected, "Maybe Canadians are so small they can't jump over?" And again, an explosion of laughter rang out. After the program aired, social networks exploded with sarcastic posts in the style of "Canadian turnstiles, gates for dogs." Canada, a G7 country known for its development, suddenly became the object of unexpected ridicule. However, a few days later, Natasha personally arrived in Canada for interviews as part of a joint project. And the moment she stepped off the plane and headed to the station, she realized how superficial her mockery had been. The turnstile, which she had called dog gates, contained a philosophy of trust which her country, Russia, in the process of vigorous security development, had partly left behind, while Canada continued to cherish it carefully. This is the story of how a Russian female engineer, amidst mockery, realized the true strength she had forgotten. At the same time, it is a sketch about the pride and worldview of Canada, imprinted in the small gates through which we pass every day. Natasha Volkov, 35 years old, from the technical department of Russian Railways, was responsible for infrastructure design. Those around her called her the Iron Lady. She worked selflessly, believing that she was an engineer carrying national responsibility on her shoulders. This time she came to Canada because RZD had launched a joint project with Via Rail on the topic of improving user experience, with the aim of comparing the systems of the two countries and adopting experience from each other. Central Russian television also filmed a report about this and released a program. It was in these circumstances that the remark about dog gates was made. In fact, Natasha already had complicated feelings towards Canada. Several years ago, her company launched a special promotion: free upgrades to business class for Canadian passengers on the Moscow-St. Petersburg route to promote cultural exchange. It was a gesture of goodwill. However, the report that landed on her table listed a number of unworthy acts by a group of Canadian passengers, leaving trash on the seats, making noise. Someone even stole amenities from the train. Canadians were always considered polite. What happened? Have they changed? She was disappointed, and she even developed a feeling close to hostility. The pride deeply rooted in her blood was the national system of high-speed railways, of which she was proud. The journey between major cities was swift, with powerful wagon designs, dizzying speed, and huge scales. This is the quintessence of technology. As an engineer, she worshipped the power of technology and efficiency. Machinery must be precise and overwhelming. Therefore, she did not feel much enthusiasm about this business trip. "What can I learn in Canada?" she said to herself, looking out the airplane window. For the film crew accompanying her, she displayed a more confident smile than usual, proud that Russian railways were the world standard. She did not yet know that in just a few days, her obvious views would be completely overturned. Landing at Toronto Pearson International Airport, Natasha involuntarily gasped in surprise. The floors shone flawlessly, and the air seemed cleaner. The staff in the arrival hall greeted her with a good-natured smile. "Welcome to Canada." These words warmed her in a strange way. Signs to the baggage claim area were in multiple languages: English, French, and others. The flow of people moved continuously. No one stopped. There were no unnecessary movements. The crowd flowed smoothly like a river. "Why is everything so smooth?" She could not refrain from asking her colleague. He shrugged. Probably they set everything up for the filming? Nevertheless, a feeling had already been born in Natasha's soul that could not be explained by the simple word staged. On the way from the airport to the hotel, she looked at the landscape outside the window. Not a speck of dust on the streets. Traffic lights switched with absolute precision. Every car kept its distance, quietly moving forward. Order, like a mechanism, but not causing rejection, completely different from the chaotic and noisy metropolises she was used to. A few days later, she read the news. In the ranking of the most livable cities in the world for 2024, Canadian cities regularly appeared at the top. Seeing these figures, Natasha grinned bitterly. It turned out it was not an accident. Cleanliness and friendliness. But this is merely service culture, far from railway technology, she said to herself, and boarded the Up Express train heading to the city center. The train started moving silently. The vibration of the carriage was so insignificant that she again felt something inexplicable. There was something fundamentally different than in Russia. What was it? She did not know yet. The next day, the Russian delegation, including Natasha, visited the offices of Via Rail. They were met by Michael Tremblay, a manager of the International Relations Department. He bowed benevolently and said in fluent Russian, "Welcome. First of all, I will show you our facilities at the station." Mr. Tremblay, in a strict suit, was very careful with his words. Even through the translation, his sincerity was felt. Natasha whispered quietly, "Typical Canadian. But this smile will disappear soon." Descending the escalator deep into the station concourse, they saw the silvery devices, rows of turnstiles. Every time a passenger tapped a card, a pleasant electronic sound was heard, and a thin glass paddle opened and immediately closed. This sequence of actions was surprisingly quiet and smooth. Mr. Tremblay pointed to them. "This is our company's passage control system." "Huh? This?" Natasha frowned. Snickers were heard among her colleagues. This was completely unlike the thick iron barriers with facial recognition they were used to seeing in Russia. Just a paddle at waist height, easily opening and closing. Too primitive. Even a child would jump over this. In Russia, this would break in one day. Mockeries poured out one after another, laughter echoing through the concourse. The film crew recorded this scene, and the director nodded with satisfaction, saying that this was a valuable shot. This fragment was later shown in Russia, causing a burst of laughter in the studio. "Surely there are many fare evaders," Natasha snorted, "and the sensors are slow. Anyone would slip through." Mr. Tremblay only smiled good-naturedly and replied, "I suggest you observe." They took turns standing in front of the cameras. And at that moment, Natasha froze. Not a single fare evader. Hundreds of passengers passed continuously. But there was no crushing or chaos. The sound of reading cards rang out evenly. People moved as if in one rhythm. Mr. Tremblay continued calmly, This turnstile allows 70 people per minute to pass. Its design was created not for defense, but so as not to interrupt the flow of users. Not for defense, muttered Natasha. Turnstiles in Russia were created based on distrust and control. Canadian turnstiles, based on trust. Just one turnstile, but the difference between the two cultures became obvious. Looking closely at the backs of the passing people, Natasha involuntarily recalled scenes at stations in her country. Giant crowds, continuous announcements over the loudspeaker, shouts of security. She always considered this natural for managing a large system. This natural was now silently mocking her. In the station hall, the laughter died down, leaving only the pleasant electronic sound. Passing through the turnstiles, she saw a platform not familiar to her. She involuntarily stopped. It was quiet there, like on a water surface. Obviously, it was rush hour. Hundreds of passengers should have been standing there, but there was no shoving or loud conversations. Office workers in suits, students, tourists. Everyone naturally lined up in a queue at the small painted markers, waiting silently. No one violated the order. As soon as a free space appeared, someone naturally occupied it. There were no words, no instructions, but everything as a whole worked, as if breathing in unison. Why does no one make remarks to them? Natasha tilted her head in bewilderment. Mr. Tremblay smiled beside her. In Canada, a queue is not just a rule. People perceive mutual respect as a habit. This concept has taken root and ultimately creates order. These words made Natasha shudder. Order created by orders and supervision. That is what she had believed until now. But what she saw before her was built on trust, not on orders. She began to understand that even when no one is looking, the value of doing the right thing develops by itself here. The train approached, the doors opened. Everyone simultaneously took a step back. Until all those exiting had left the carriage, no one moved from their spot. In this silence, only the squeak of metal was heard. Soon the queue began to move. People calmly entered the carriage. No one hurried. No one complained. She involuntarily recalled scenes of struggle and shoving, common for her homeland. She once prided herself on this as the vitality of a nation always moving forward, but now she felt ashamed of this thought. It seems I understand why this small turnstile is not broken, Natasha muttered. Canadian railways were governed not by rules, but by trust. Not supervision, but self-awareness. Not machines, but human hearts. Before she could finish speaking, the train started moving, like a floating cloud. Natasha, holding her breath, looked at her watch. The hour and minute hands coincided with the departure schedule to the second. The departure error at this moment is 0, Mr. Tremblay said calmly. In his words, there was not a hint of boasting, only a warm statement of daily efforts. Natasha exhaled quietly and smiled. It was not a contemptuous or sarcastic smile, but a natural smile when the soul is touched. Amazing. For the first time, I am riding in a train that departs so smoothly, as if time gently approaches the person. Mr. Tremblay narrowed his eyes slightly. Yes, Canadian railways are a place where time is measured by the breathing of people, not by machines. The machine measures the flow, but the human feels the flow. These words sank deep into her soul. Time measured by the breathing of people. The meaning of the word precision was quietly changing in her consciousness. Then Natasha moved to the platform of the intercity train. The same station, but the density of the air seemed to have changed. It was a feeling unfamiliar to her. The moment she stepped onto the platform, Natasha held her breath. Hundreds of people stood in line. The air was transparent and quiet. Only the wind and announcements could be heard. It seemed time itself held its breath. Why is it so quiet? She could not refrain from whispering. Mr. Tremblay smiled good-naturedly. In Canada, silence is not patience, but a civilized act so as not to disturb the time of others. For example, cleaning up trash after eating. This is not only because one does not want to cause inconvenience, but also out of empathy for the next person who will be there. Thus, the culture of mutual respect has been passed down from parents to children for generations. This empathy remains the pillar of this land today. The moment she heard these words, a warm wave spilled over Natasha's chest. Mutual respect became culture. She had not experienced such a feeling in her homeland. There, bustle was a symbol of development, but in Canada, silence seemed like a moment of prayer connecting people. Entering the carriage of the train, she immediately understood what he meant. Not a speck of dust on the seats. The light from the window reflected softly. The passenger next to her quietly put his empty can into his own bag. People walking along the aisle nodded slightly to each other. Everyone respected the existence of the other, connected by an invisible thread. During the trip, the sunset painted the carriage in crimson tones. Gentle light enveloped people's faces. Everyone was reading, napping, or silently looking out the window. This silence sounded in the soul like a chorale. Natasha realized that the silence of Canadians is not muteness, but an almost prayerful act, an action for the sake of others, entered into daily life and telling the story of this place, not with words, but with actions. Therein lay the strength of this place, completely different from the method of imposing order through heavy technology. The expression on her own face, reflected in the window, was no longer an expression of comparison, but was colored with deep emotion. An announcement sounded in the train. "At present, the train is proceeding on schedule." Natasha asked with a smile. "And what is the margin of error for on schedule?" The average annual delay for these trains allows for very tight tolerances. Over a year, the deviation is minimal. For a moment, she could not grasp the meaning of the efficiency. The mind understood, but the heart did not keep up. In Russia, high-speed trains were also punctual, but it was the result of a giant control system and rigid procedures. A delay was considered a technical error. When she understood this, a warm feeling rose from the depths of her chest. Then in the training center, the drivers seriously performed a simulation. Even an error of 5 seconds the body can feel. Hearing the words of a young driver, Natasha sighed in admiration. In Russia, if you speak about being late by 5 seconds, it would be considered a joke. Her laughter trembled, as if she were holding back tears. In the accuracy measured by seconds, a human was truly present. On the last day, Natasha and the delegation visited the Network Operations Center. A huge screen occupied the entire wall. Countless glowing dots displayed the movement of trains, pulsing like a heart. Employees quietly exchanged commands over headsets. No one spoke loudly. No one showed anxiety. In this room, a delay of 1 minute is treated seriously. The words of the guide, Mr. Tremblay, instantly made the atmosphere tense. He also spoke about the disaster response system. When a sensor detects the slightest vibration or obstacle, AI immediately analyzes the data to ensure safety, faster than a human. But the final decision is always made by a human. Machines exist not to surpass the human, but to protect them. Too perfect, Natasha involuntarily muttered. She had never seen a place where the relationship between technology and humans was so harmonious. Inside the cold data lurked human warmth. This gentle perfection touched her heart. Most of all, she was impressed by the model of the next generation train. A huge model appeared silently before her. The guide explained with a smile, "The target speed will be higher, but the most amazing thing is its silence." The video showed how the train glides smoothly, without the squeak of metal, only the smooth cutting of air. as if the future is quietly approaching. Natasha's words were more like a prayer than admiration. Mr. Tremblay said softly, "Canadian railways exist not just for speed, but to deliver people to their destination, reliably and quietly." At that moment, something in Natasha's soul melted. In Russia, speed was a subject of pride, but in Canada, silence was proof of trust. "Inconspicuous, but perfect," she whispered. "Canada is a quiet land rushing into the future." She was sure of this and quietly closed her eyes. On the night before departure, in the hotel lobby, Natasha received an email from the television channel's investigative team. Subject: Truth about the business class passenger incident. Opening it, she was amazed. The passengers with bad behavior who caused problems in Russia were not Canadians. The results of the investigation showed that it was a group of tourists from another country using fake IDs. Pain pierced her heart. Images of Canadians standing orderly in line, silently waiting on the platform, surfaced again. No one argued. No one pushed. The truth, which she did not want to believe, finally became clear. "I was wrong," a weak voice escaped her lips. She did not blame her ignorance, but regretted that she turned away from the truth. It was not a failure, but the beginning of knowledge. On the plane back to her homeland, she opened a notebook. Silence, trust, human-centric design. Words learned in Canada filled the page. Apply this to Russian railways. This thought quietly lit up in her heart. Returning to her homeland, Natasha proposed at a meeting, "I want to build a system based on trust, not on design that controls users. The era of building turnstiles and stations based on distrust of humans is over." At first, colleagues laughed at her, but she did not give up. A few months later, at a new station in a regional city, the user flow design proposed by Natasha based on trust was applied. The number of surveillance cameras was reduced, passages were widened, and a structure was created encouraging people to naturally give way to each other. As a result, the number of conflicts decreased, work efficiency increased, and the station became calmer. "You can safely bring children here." Every time Natasha heard these words from users, her heart warmed. Security guards also said, "Incredible. There are fewer cameras, but people seem to have become kinder." Standing on the finished platform, exposing her face to the wind, she smiled. Silence born of trust. The picture she saw in Canada still sounded in her heart. A few weeks later, Central Russian Television released a special program, Canada, a country governed by silence. It began with Natasha's journey, from Toronto Pearson Airport to the almost soundless platform, the strikingly ordered queue, and the scene where people passed through small turnstiles, as if breathing in unison. The viewers in the studio gradually fell silent. The host said, "In these small turnstiles is enclosed the trust that the world, in the race of technology, has sometimes forgotten." At the moment the program ended, the guests in the studio applauded simultaneously. It was not a roar of delight, but quiet applause full of deep respect. The commentator who had previously mocked said into the microphone, "What irony! We laughed at Canadian turnstiles, calling them dog gates. But in reality, it is we who are locked in a cage of mechanical rules. This is not a small gate. This is an entrance to a world of trust." These words plunged the studio into silence again. Then someone quietly said, "The strength of Canada lies in what has no voice." After the broadcast, the program was reprinted by media around the world. Countless comments poured into social networks. Only a culture without pushing can create the best railways in the world. Trust is a more reliable protection than sensors. They are moved not by rules, but by the soul. The silence of this place made me cry. Below the comments was attached a photo of the Station of Trust, designed by Natasha. The sun flooded the platform, and on the faces of the people walking along it, light pride and tenderness could be read. The final voiceover softly pronounced, "The turnstile in Canada is not just a gate. The world sees in it the project of the soul of the Canadian people called trust." The screen changed. White titles appeared. Silence is not emptiness. Silence is trust. If this story touched your heart, press the subscribe and like button to support the land that stirred the world. Canada. Your quiet applause will become a stimulus for new emotions. Thank you for watching to the end.